I don't know if you just heard my throat just there, just went "Arr." You probably hear my stomach as well. Hello there, hi! Welcome to my channel. My name is Amber Sands and I am a queen who likes to read. So ever since I was a teeny tiny baby queen, I've been an avid reader.
What do you want a book for?
To read.
To read?
Back then, my favourite authors were Jacqueline Wilson, Meg Cabot, Louise Renison. I want to read about friends in school and broken families and traumatic events that definitely won't shape me in future. Thanks, Jacqueline. This year I found a free book tracker, which I will link in the description, where you can put the author, the title, whether the author is trans or a person of colour, whether there's disability representation, and there's all kinds of other metrics that you can add, and it compiles it all together for you and gives you statistics and charts, which sounds so nerdy, but once you see it, it's kind of exciting, but also it helps you identify where the gaps in your reading are. With that in mind, I would like to present you with what I read in January 2023. The majority of my books I get from charity shops.
It's just coming. Do.
So if some of these look a bit tattered, it's because they're used. So the first book that I read this month was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. If you're planning on reading this book, do keep in mind that there are frank discussions of mental health. That's the crux of the plot. So the story centres around Nora. She has a very, very bad day that goes from very bad to very worse. Feeling lonely and out of place and desperate, she decides that enough is enough. She doesn't want to see tomorrow. She's going to make a decision that will change her life. She awakens in a library of sorts, and on the shelves are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of titles. She is greeted by a librarian who she remembers that she used to have when she was at school.
You're pretty cocky for someone whose job is obsolete because of the internet.
So each title in the library is a life that she could have lived. It's really a story of living through your shoulda, coulda, woulda and deciding whether or not your actual life is better or worse for those decisions. So I loved this book. I think it is the perfect antidote to the new year, new me rhetoric that always goes around at the start of a new year.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Everybody lives with regrets. Everybody wishes that they could have done something different. I really like the idea that the author is teaching you to embrace your failures as part of you, and that you shouldn't wish for another life. Not that you should be grateful for the one you have, but the one you have is full of your failures and full of your disappointments and regrets, but that's what makes it so special. So my rating, based on my very arbitrary rating system, is back on the shelf. Book number 1 down. The next book on my list that I read in January 2023 is The Familiars by Stacey Halls. The Familiars is set in Lancashire in 1612 and centres around a 17-year-old Fleetwood Shuttleworth. And little old Fleetwood is living in a time when the panic around witches is just starting. I think the author is from Pendle, or she studied or she lived in Pendle, where the witch trials first began in England in the 1600s. You might have heard of the Pendle witches. And so there are whisperings of that in this book, and that provides the background historical context for this novel. So again, I want to point out potential trigger warnings. Fleetwood has been pregnant 3 times before, but none of them have ever reached full term. The novel opens with her running from her house into the woods. She's got a crumpled letter in her hand, and she waits until she gets to the woods to read what this letter has to say. So it's not really too much of a spoiler because it happens like literally within the first 5 pages of the book. But the letter says that were she to carry this child to full term, then both mother and child would die because her body is too weak to be able to give birth. And so right from the very start, Fleetwood's on the back foot because she feels that her husband is keeping this a secret from her when it's her body. She should have autonomy, she should know what is happening with her own body, but she had to find out from a letter that she basically stole from him. All of these themes are, of course, depressingly common, especially for the 17th century, due to the lack of medical expertise, hygiene standards, and a huge lack of knowledge of women's health. I guess times don't really change, huh? While she's out in the woods, she meets another woman who's trespassing on her land called Alice Gray. Unbeknownst to her, is about to be dragged herself into accusations of witchcraft and thereby taking Fleetwood. I want to keep calling her, what's that guy's name in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs?
What you doing, Flint Lockwood?
All the time I was reading it, I kept wanting to call her Guybrush Threepwood. That's why it kept sounding so familiar. Fleetwood Shuttleworth, Guybrush Threepwood. Anyway, so throughout the whole novel, there's threats aplenty. Men bearing down on women, there's wise women being mistaken for witches and then persecuted. The criticism I would give it is I really wish there was more reason as to why these men decided that they hated the women so much. I'm sure that I could pick up a history book and find that out for myself, but I just really wish that there was more context for that in the book. The other criticism I have is that she didn't really seem like she was 17. Little Miss Guybrush Threepwood, she felt like she was more like 24, and I don't know if it's that what she had personally been through brings a level of maturity to her, but I just did not believe and could not believe that she was 17 and that she was that young. I also didn't really like the portrayal of Alice Gray. She was basically a sitting duck. She lives in a tower in the woods. The tower's not kept very clean. She lives with a bunch of other women, one of which has a deformity. I think perhaps a much more interesting plot for it would be if Fleetwood / Guybrush were the one that was accused of witchcraft, and then we would see how a common woman would potentially help a woman of nobility and help them both get out of this situation. All in all, I'll probably forget I read it by the end of the year, but that hasn't stopped me purchasing Mrs. England and the Foundling when I found them in secondhand shops. I would really recommend this book if you're looking for a historical novel that is not bogged down by details and dates and times and lords and ladies.
William Henry, Stephen Henry, Richard John.
This, that and the other. And at its core, it's a tale of two women facing different mortal perils, helping each other out. And I think that's a positive narrative to have.
It's just having...
However, this is a redonate. So next on my list of books that I read is The Princess Bride by William Golding. And I have thoughts.
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
I hated it. I hated it. Just take the middle of the book, rip out everything else, and just leave the middle of the book and read that instead. Just don't even waste your time with the rest of it. You know, Princess Buttercup's baby, couldn't give a shit, just read the middle. If you're familiar with The Princess Bride, you've probably seen the film, which I'm reliably informed is much, much better. I've never seen it.
You what?
So if you don't know, the story of The Princess Bride, the novel, is that this is an abridged version of a fictional book written by somebody Morgenstern. So what you have is essentially a story within a story. So you've got the author William Golding explaining how he first came across The Princess Bride, how it was read to him by his father when he was sick as a child, and he then goes on to want to read it to his own child. When he comes to reread it himself as an adult, he realizes that his father left out a lot of really boring information, which the author then decides to put in, but differently.
This is so boring!
The story of The Princess Bride itself is actually pretty fun, and I did enjoy that bit. You've got the bandit and the big giant. I think the other major plot point that really lets this down is that Princess Buttercup is a damsel in distress who gets married off and needs saving. Blech, blech. Like, I couldn't care. I don't care. There are a few of the obvious catchphrases in there. I don't think you
want.
I do not think that means what you think it means, because somebody keeps saying inconceivable. Somebody has very handily written in the front, remember, never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line. Which, you know, does appear, and I guess that's iconic. I wouldn't know.
What is it?
Ratings wise, begrudgingly, it will be going back on my shelf because I know that it's a modern classic. If anybody ever needs a copy of it, or if I ever have children or nieces and nephews that are reading it at school, I have a copy back on the shelf. Shit, I knocked a wig over. Fucking Princess Bride, that's what I'm telling you. The next book I read in January 2023, have you got the gist and the pattern yet? Is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This was such a slog to get through in the beginning.
You're not just wrong, you're stupid.
Bitch.
The best way that I can describe this book is if Doctor Who got given Hermione's time turner, went to Downton Abbey, except it all happens within the world of Quantum Leap. And if that feels confusing to you, imagine reading it. So the novel opens with our protagonist. He doesn't know his name, he's running through the woods, he's shouting Anna. He doesn't know why, we don't know why. He comes across a big manor house, he knocks on the door, boom, boom, boom. Old guy opens it, lets him in, and then we're introduced to all of the cast of characters. Now, helpfully, at the start of the book, we have a map of the manor, and we also have a cast of characters and everyone that's been invited to a dinner party, which is what the story centres around. I personally find this kind of thing really confusing. I know it's meant to be there as a help, but I'm already immediately overwhelmed.
Stupid.
Oh shit, this book has like 20 characters in it and I'm going to have to keep track of them all. The narrator retires to bed where he is visited by a person who appears to be dressed in a plague doctor costume. That's scary as all fuck. And the plague doctor tells him that he has 7 days to solve the murder of Evelyn Hardcastle. I think the thing I struggled with the most is that you have 7 days, great, you have 7 hosts, but that's 7 different storylines that are all happening at exactly the same time. But interspersed with that, you have the protagonist who finds out later on through the book that his real name is Aidan, because he has no idea who he is for half of the book. He's jumping into all these other different people and he cannot remember who he was before. Slowly throughout the book, he does begin to remember. It is revealed why he's there, why he's stuck in this loop. Who the fuck is Anna?
Who are you?
It's one of those books where once the end is revealed to you, you want to go right back to the beginning and see if you can spot the signs. And so my rating is that this is going back on the shelf so I can reread it this time next year. Okay, I'm really sorry if the camera angles keep changing. I'm having issues with the camera batteries and trying to put new ones in all the time. Anyway, next up, I read All of the Above by Juno Dawson, who is fast becoming one of my favourite authors. I really enjoyed this book. So the first book from Juno Dawson that I read was Meat Market, and although I didn't so much enjoy the story, I really got sucked into her style of writing and the way that she writes young adult. I would describe All of the Above as a grown-up Jacqueline Wilson. If you grew up on the Girls series, like Girls in Tears, Girls Out Late, and any Louise Renison, like Georgia Nicholson, then this is going to be so up your street. So the story focuses on the new girl at school called Toria. She's 16, she has moved to one of the many hundreds of faded British coastline towns where there's really not much going on. But she finds herself in a group of new friends very quickly, and you've got the sexy musician, the emo girl, the Rory Gilmore.
So, it's another novel. Lose it.
It's short stories.
Ugh, this is a sickness. Michelle?
I am growing very old.
So after college, they all like to meet at this crazy golf course. But one day they go there after college and they find that it's closed, and it's going to be closed forever. The land has been sold and there's going to be some kind of chain restaurant built on the land. That's kind of the pivotal turning point for everything falling apart. Once they lose the crazy golf, they lose their relationships, they lose their friendships. The crazy golf is the glue that holds them all together, and without that, they all fall apart. Like I said, I would highly recommend this for any grown-up Jacqueline Wilson readers. Also, if you ever watch the Channel 4 series Sugar Rush, this is so up your alley, you might as well change your surname to McBeal.
Hello? That's not funny!
Plus, it's a YA comedy romance written by a trans author featuring LGBT storylines. Like, what else? What else can you want? I also got HMRC, Her Majesty's Royal Coven, for Christmas. I cannot wait to get started. For now, this is going back on the shelf. I just feel that it needs to exist with my old battered and tattered Jacqueline Wilsons just for a little while. It just needs to smell those books, and then it'll probably be redonated. One of my reading goals for 2023 is to read more from authors of LGBT, trans or POC backgrounds in order to broaden my horizons. I appreciate that so far this list has not really shown that in my reading. That's not really been reflected in my list so far. However, the next book has been on my wanted to read for all of last year, and it is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. My Sister the Serial Killer is set in Nigeria, and it centres around Korede. I'm really sorry. Korede is eating dinner one evening, and she gets a call from her sister, and her sister is desperately asking for her help. So she rushes over there, finds her sister in the bathroom, and there's blood everywhere. And it turns out her sister has killed again. Korede is a nurse at her local hospital, and she is a bit big, been single a really long time, generally looked down upon by the staff and made fun of by the reception staff. She's not really respected at work. Her younger sister is beautiful, thin, skinny, pretty, all of the adjectives for a Regina George type. And she uses that to lure men to her and then ultimately kill them. There is a reason why. Although the subject matter is very serious, I actually think it's quite a weak reason why. Again, it's very obvious, it's quite predictable. I wish there had been more descriptors of Nigeria and locations outside of a hospital or people's houses, and her sister dresses beautifully. Nigerian fashions are so amazing and colourful, and I really wish that came through more in the book. For the amount of detail that I would perhaps personally like, probably wouldn't fit in this book. I wish it was more meaty and gristly and had more substance rather than, oh, my sister's so pretty, she lures in men, she's a black widow, she kills them. Also, there's like maybe 3 or 4 sentences outlining the definition of serial killer, and that because her sister had just killed number 3, she was the textbook definition of a serial killer, and then it's never mentioned again. It's gonna have to be a redonate. I didn't enjoy it, and I think for a crime novel it could have been grittier, and it just wasn't.
Disappointed!
So we're on to my last book for January. Woo! And it's actually one that I haven't quite finished. It's Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier, Jamaican McCrazy. Oh, and I've got a beautiful, there you go, look, you can see I paid all of £1 English.
£1,000? I should say about £1,000. It's too much, £1,000.
So if you don't know already, Jamaica Inn is set in Cornwall, specifically Bodmin Moor, and Jamaica Inn is a real place. You can go and visit it, but more on that later. After the death of her mother, Mary Yellen crosses the windswept Cornish moors to Jamaica Inn, the home of her Aunt Patience. So basically, her mother tragically passes away, but before she passes, her mother says to her, "You must travel to Jamaica Inn and look after my sister, your Aunt Patience." She does. She gets there, she arrives in the wind and the rain, and she's all cold and chilly. She is introduced to her uncle, Joss Merlin, and he is the landlord of the Jamaica Inn. What follows is part historical fiction, part historical mystery / thriller, as Mary learns more about her uncle and about how exactly the inn is run. This is another one that took me a while to get into, mostly because I've read a lot of modern fiction this month, and going into a classic, this was written in the 1930s, but it's set in the 1800s, and the type of prose reflects that. So when you're going from modern writing to quite old-fashioned writing, it can be a bit jarring.
Stupid.
However, Daphne du Maurier has such a way of sucking you into the action. There were some parts where I was genuinely like, oh my god, I have to get through this, I have to know what happens. This is some of the best writing I've ever written, and I love that about this book, and I'm having a really, really good time reading it. I'm going to turn a criticism into a positive and say the book almost constantly mentions the cold and wet and windy and dreary moors, calling out to you, Wuthering Heights. But turning that into a positive, it's pathetic fallacy, right? Where the weather conditions and the outside conditions reflect how the protagonist is feeling. You can visit the real Jamaica Inn. It's on the road between Launceston and somewhere else, not sure, and I think it is genuinely like a 20-mile stretch of road. I've definitely been along that road before and seen the sign for Jamaica Inn. I've always thought that Jamaica Inn is where they make like either that I'm sure they used to have like a Cadbury's Bourneville chocolate where it's like rum and raisin, and I thought maybe that's where they make it, that or the Lyle's Jamaica cake, and I was like, oh cool, it's an inn named after a cake. Stupid bitch, sing with me. Once I finished it, there must be a BBC interpretation of this. There must be, or some kind of film or something, some media out there somewhere that has turned this into moving pictures.
It's just the way we talk in Tucson, Arizona.
I've got maybe like 50 pages left, not long to go, and I've really, really enjoyed this so far. So this is going back on the shelf. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for sticking with me and listening to me ramble about these 7 books that I have read this month. A lot of book talk and a lot of booktube is competitive. There's a lot of, I read 20 books this month. I read an entire series in 48 hours because I have nothing else to do. I read 7 books because that's what I can manage. If you can manage 1 book, if you can manage 1 book a year, if you can manage half a book a year, if you didn't manage 1 book a year, that is completely fine. What I really don't want this to turn into is a competition, and to make anyone feel bad about the amount they read or don't read. This has really come about from me posting on my Instagram stories about the books that I have read and finished. All that to say, if you're watching this video and you feel bad because you haven't read any books this month, who gives a shit, dude? Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. I bet you have managed other things this month that I could never do. Like, if you're a mechanic and you fixed an engine today, well done, I can't do that. I haven't fixed any engines today. Or if you're a guitarist and you wrote a chorus today or a riff, fucking well done. I can't do that. I can read, but I can't do those things. Everybody has something that they can and can't do, right? And it shouldn't be a competition. And this is rambling, but these are the 7 books I read this month. I'll catch you in February. Bye.